Hello, and welcome to the November 8th, 2023 meeting of the Thurston Regional Housing Council. I'm Carolyn Cox, representing Lacey, and we have also from Lacey, Ryan Andrews, our planning manager, and Jennifer Adams, our housing coordinator. And let's move on to Tumwater.
Hi there, Michael Altauser, Tumwater City Council. I'm joined by Brad Medrud from our planning department. Councilmember Joan Cathy is unable to join us today.
Thank you, Michael. And let's go to Thurston County.
Thank you, Carolina Mejia, Thurston County Commissioner, and we have joining us today, we have David Bain, who's our Public Health and Social Services Director. We have Tom Webster, Keely Marino, Cody Anderson, and we'll have Robin Campbell joining us here shortly.
All righty, thank you. And Olympia.
Hey everybody, Danny Madron with the Olympia City Council. We've got Mayor Pro Tem Gilman with us, Clark Gilman, and also Jacinda Stelgis, our Affordable Housing Program Coordinator.
Right. And I'm not seeing Yilm here. Is anybody else seeing? I'm having a little navigational trouble here with this unfamiliar computer.
I'm here, Carolyn. Gary Cooper.
Oh, Gary's here. Okay, wonderful.
Yeah, and I just want to let you know, for some reason, this is the only meeting where Zoom will not let me video. So that's why you're just seeing my name and not my face. I don't know what it is about this meeting. I just got off of a Zoom meeting 10 minutes ago and it worked fine. So anyway, but I'm here.
Well, I wonder why the connection isn't working for you. That's weird. All righty. Well, has everybody had a chance to look over the agenda? If so, could I have oh, wait a minute. I want to also welcome Talana Reed from our Affordable Housing Advisory Group. Talana, welcome. And are you going to be joined by some of the other members today? Do you know?
I only know of a couple people that said they weren't going to be here, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
So Chair Cox, yes, they are joining us. They're as attendees now. We'll promote them as panelists when that agenda item comes up for the agenda.
Okay, awesome. All right, thank you. All righty, could I have a motion to approve the agenda, please?
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we have an agenda. And can we get approval of the minutes from our October 25th meeting?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, any discussion on the minutes? All right, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We're done with that one. Do we have anybody signed up for public comment or waiting in the wings on phone for public comment?
No public comment.
I didn't quite hear that.
Oh, sorry, no public comment.
No comment. Okay, great. Thank you. And that brings us to Tom Webster and legislative agenda. And before we launch, I really want to thank the tech team for the care they took in going over these items and ranking them and looking at the possibilities that would come out of each one. It was a really thorough job, and I know it wasn't an easy one, and there wasn't a lot of time to do it. So thank you so much. And Tom?
Yep, thank you, Chair Cox. So in your meeting packet, and I can share my screen if that's helpful, the tech team took the legislative priorities that were discussed and presented and approved by the RHC last week as a total package, and you asked us to prioritize those. So the tech team, we just did a very straightforward priority survey. So it's tech team members ranked those from 1 to 9. We averaged those out, and we identified our top 3 priorities. And so in your package, we've done a little formatting. We've added a little narrative to provide some context and explanation behind those priorities. And so the top three were, number one was to increase funding to meet the continued need for rent assistance for low-income renters in Thurston County. Number two was to provide long-term operational funds for programs established and paid for by the Governor's Right-of-Way Initiative. And number three was to increase capital funding through the Housing Trust Fund for the development and preservation of affordable housing. So those three are listed at the top there. And then the rest of the document, we've also grouped them by those priorities around support for renters, and then grouped some around funding priorities, funding for affordable housing capital projects, and then a final group to support the implementation of housing action plans. So just did a little formatting and provided that narrative. So I think so that's what the tech team is bringing you today. And there was discussion about jurisdictions taking this back and whether you had to place for one or two of these priorities for your own jurisdictional legislative agendas to add those if possible. But happy to answer any questions, but this is what the tech team came up for you in response to the meeting 2 weeks ago.
All righty. Thank you, Tom. Does anybody have questions or comments? No one that I'm seeing. Oh, Carolina?
Thank you.
And then Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Cox. I just want to thank the tech team really for the thoughtful legislative agenda that you've put forward. It looks really great, and the explanation between each of the items I think is really good. So just really thank you for that. And the top three priorities I think are really great. And I know for Thurston County, we had a conversation about this, and we're going to be including kind of this into our legislative priorities as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, Carolina. Danny?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo the sentiments of gratitude for the tech team to put a little extra time into this and pull the top three. Funding. That's what I'm hearing. Really important stuff. And I just like how comprehensive this is. This is an incredibly useful document. And I think that's what we were talking about last time we met, is like, how can we have something that we can communicate from that has our shared priorities. And so I guess my question, or I assume this is going to happen, but after we hopefully approve this, because I think there's a decision to be made, can we be sent the document separate from the agenda packet so I can forward it on to my council? We can all start to use it.
Yeah, certainly. We will send this out. We will also post it to the RHC website.
Excellent.
Yeah. Thank you. Michael, did you have a hand raised too?
No, but I did want to sort of just echo the thanks for the tech team for putting this together. I think this achieved what we were hoping to get, as we discussed at our last meeting. And so just so I'm clear on procedure, this is a document that we will then take to our respective councils for inclusion in our respective legislative agendas for our various jurisdictions. Correct?
Yes, at least for consideration to adopt some or all of that. But
Yeah,
with the record,
I know for Olympia, I will probably ask our lobbyist to have this in hand as she's going around with the other priorities that we have in Olympia too, to be able to share both of them. So,
Right.
yeah.
I'm pretty sure Lacey's going to have a housing priority, so it can work the same way. We can give the lobbyists the whole shebang, but do that. I want to pause and welcome Robin Campbell, our county manager, to the meeting. Robin, thanks for joining us. Glad you're here. And I couldn't quite see when you zoomed in, so are you aware of where we are in the meeting in terms of talking about the legislative agenda?
Yes, thank you. It looks great. Much appreciation.
Good. I'm glad you liked it, and I appreciated your input at the last meeting on that as well. So any other conversation about the legislative agenda? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the legislative agenda as submitted with gold stars,
Move approval
with gold stars.
Second.
with gold stars.
Okay, good. All right, it's been moved and seconded with gold stars to approve the legislative priorities for the 2023-2024 legislative session. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, and gold stars. Alrighty, moving on, we have Jennifer Adams who's going to walk us through our Housing Action Plan crosswalk. This is a big piece of work. Jennifer, thank you. Take it away.
Hi, thank you, Chair Cox. Can everybody hear me okay? First off,
Yes.
great. I unfortunately am the queen of having some tech issues, so thank you for your patience. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen, and we will go from there. Okay. Can you all see the PowerPoint to this point?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. All right. So again, good afternoon, everybody. I'll try to move through this as quickly as I can. The tech team wanted to take an opportunity to kind of share the process that we went through to achieve identifying some common actions throughout our housing action plans, and then come to you today and present a few recommendations. So I do believe that you have a document included in your packet, but we'll touch upon that here as well today. First of all, we met with the objective of reviewing each of our jurisdictions' housing action plans and identifying actions in common across jurisdictions, and then selecting several of those common actions to recommend as actions that would be best implemented and leveraged through the support of the Regional Housing Council. So the cities of Lacey, Olympia, Tumwater, and Yelm, and along with the support of Thurston County, decided to take an in-person approach to participation in what we called the crosswalk exercise. And through this process, we found that participation in deep discussions yielded excellent collaboration, as well as a mindful approach to examining our individual housing action plans, comparing them, and then also discussing the goals that we share in common as a region. And we also had a very important discovery that cookies are also essential when we need to apply critical thinking and collaboration. And so again, I just wanted to touch upon the fact that I really appreciated the efforts of the tech team. I think that we all feel that our in-person efforts were very productive and gave us that just kind of that level of engagement that sometimes is missed in today's day of Zoom. Though we do love the technology, so it was wonderful to get together in person, and I think it really showed a strong commitment, as well as helping to develop our communication as a tech team. So thank you everybody on tech team for all of your efforts and collaboration on this process. So this is just what I like to quickly call the 654-3-2-1. So our process included 6 common housing action plan goals, 5 prioritized actions to elevate to the RHC for support, the collaboration of 4 cities, but also including Thurston County as well. 3 categories that we referred to as buckets, which included funding, education, and outreach, and policy. 2 in-person meetings that we held here at the City of Lacey, and then 1 final deliverable that is being presented today in the form of a final document, again, I believe found in your packet. So just to present here a simple timeline of some of the steps that we began. So each jurisdiction started by submitting their housing action plan data, basically in the form of a spreadsheet, to one designated person. And in this case, that person was me. So once the data was collected, we really needed a way to be able to keep it organized and for our next steps, especially those in-person meetings. So a dashboard was then created, and I'm going to speak to that a little bit more later on in my slide presentation. But the dashboard's purpose was for organization. And then after our data was all located in one place and was easily accessible to all of the members of tech team, we then proceeded with our two different in-person meetings that occurred, one in September and then one in the month of October. And the first meeting was a chance to identify all common actions that multiple jurisdictions shared and that could potentially be supported at a regional level. And then at the second meeting, we aimed to further narrow that scope a bit and select items that we believe the RHC could begin immediately undertaking. It was critical to describe our process and prepare a deliverable for the RHC, which in this case, again, will be that final document. And I missed the presentation, but here we are in the presentation. So that was also part of our process. So going back for a moment to the first step in the process, which was jurisdictions submitting a spreadsheet of their common action, or excuse me, of their HAP actions. Oh, I apologize, everyone. I apologize. I'm working off of some notes here. So let's see. Let's see, last steps. Okay, so that's okay. We don't have to have notes. So we're just going to go ahead and we're just going to review the 6 common actions shared across jurisdictions. And so those are, excuse me, the goals. So goal 1, actions that increase the supply of permanently affordable housing for households that make 80% or less of the area median income. Goal 2, make it easier for households to access housing and stay housed. Goal 3, expand the overall housing supply by making it easier to build all types of housing projects. Goal 4, increase the variety of housing choices. 5, continually build on resources, collaboration, and public understanding to improve implementation of housing strategies. And then goal 6, establish a permanent source of funding for low-income housing. And then going back just a moment, this is where I was at, I apologize. So going back just a moment, when jurisdictions submitted their data spreadsheets, some questions that guided that process were for jurisdictions to identify each housing action plan action respective to those 6 goals that we just looked at together. And then for the housing action plan action implementation status. So in other words, where's each jurisdiction at in addressing some of these actions? We were looking at a timeline of those actions to occur. We were looking also for examples of those actions in terms of implementation across each jurisdiction. And then we also asked jurisdictions to kind of assess resources needed to continue the work, to start the work, or to further the work. And then finally, we were looking to see if these actions would be more likely to occur if they had the support of the RHC. So those help guide that initial process. And then I wanted to just speak for a moment here because there are so many actions that we identified. Again, those will be captured in the document that we have prepared for you. And they are all very important. And the tech team sees all of our actions as very, very important. But again, with the purpose of trying to identify a few that within this next coming year, we could begin getting some support on. That was the objective. But as an example, some other very important ones that we may see in the future would be some of these here. So have developers provide tenants displaced by redevelopment with relocation assistance, identify and implement appropriate tenant protections that improve household stability, establish a rental registration program to improve access to data and share information with landlords, and possibly track data on affordable housing at a regional level. So those are things that we anticipate to continue looking at in the future. So again, I talked about, we sort of use the term buckets. We liked that term, so it stuck. So we tried to visualize our process of 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 whether these items we were talking about fit in this bucket or that bucket. And so we came up with 3 buckets: a funding bucket, education and outreach, and a policy bucket. So what you're seeing on your screen right here actually represents the 5 final items that the tech team is today bringing to the RHC, and hoping that we all align with these. So in the funding bucket, you'll see that we have selected fund development projects that increase the supply of affordable housing through grants and loans, providing funding for low income and special needs residents to purchase housing through community land trusts, develop a comprehensive funding strategy for affordable housing that addresses both sources of funding and how the fund should be spent. In our education and outreach bucket, you can see we have conduct education and outreach around city programs that support affordable housing. And then in our policy bucket, we have that we'd really like to work towards establishing a program to preserve and maintain healthy and viable manufactured home parks. And so just to share in the vein of transparency throughout our crosswalk process, I thought I would like to take a stab at sharing the dashboard that I spoke about, which helped us to organize our work. We found that it was a great tool for, again, organizing and comparing information, as well as promoting a successful process. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this. We're going to really hope for the best here, so just bear with me for a moment. Okay. Okay, are you able to see this right now, this Housing Action Plan dashboard? Yes, okay. All right. So this, again, was just something that we found very effective to help us keep all of our data in one place. And this allowed us to all access this with a link that we all had in common. We at the top, we're mindful to put our goals so that we knew what we were talking about. And then we started our process by having everybody's independent goals. I'll just click on an example here so that you can just see kind of what that looked like for us. It's going to look like a bunch of gibberish, but um, it is taking a moment to load here. So you can see that we included quite a bit of data. And again, we were looking to kind of get some information about some of these categories that I mentioned. And so once we collected all of this from every jurisdiction, it just helped make our process easier because again, everything was right here in one location. We were able to also post other documents that might be helpful as we were working through the process, such as our independent housing action plans, and then, also post meeting agendas. So this was a really helpful tool, and I think that it's something that we will continue using as we move forward and do more work on this process in the future. So I'm going to go ahead and close that and close that. And I think I just have one last little slide for you guys. And that is our final deliverable, the document that I've been speaking to. And the question is, what's in that final deliverable? And some of you may have had a chance to look at it. But just to prepare you, I think that what you'll find there is why the work was done. You're going to find those 5 priorities at the beginning of the document. And then as you work through the document, it'll give you a chance to look at the 6 common goals, defined the importance of the goals, and then the common actions that were defined, even those that weren't selected in this first 5 prioritized list. And then there's information there as well about how each action aims to reduce housing costs. And then Krista Lenson also did great work in providing some language around our fair housing and how each of our actions address or plan to address equity. And whoops. go whack for a moment. I'm just going to go ahead and try to click on that. And this will be the last, and I'll let you guys be free after this. There we go. Okay. So again, this should be the document here that you find in your packet. So do take the time to look through that. If you haven't had a chance, I think that you will find it helpful. Thank you to Brad as well. Thank you to everybody, but Brad, thank you very much for a lot of the edits that you helped with on this document. And I think as you move through it, you can easily find what you're looking for. Here at the top are those 5 main priorities that we have fleshed out that we'd like to hopefully get approved into our RHC work plan. And then again, if you'd like further information on those as you move through your document, you should be able to easily see all of the other items that we found that we had in common and anticipate those to come up probably in the future. And that's all I have for everybody. So we can open for discussion. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Jennifer. Okay, questions, Danny?
This is so cool. Great work, everybody. I really, really like seeing this. And the dashboard is really neat. Is that an internal tool for you all to use as the tech team, or is that something that the public will also be able to interface with?
So 2 answers. It certainly could be interfaced by anybody that we collectively choose. So I think that that would be up for discussion if that makes sense. But currently it's being used as an internal tool.
Okay, I don't have any judgments about that.
Yeah.
Internal tools are great. I also saw it and I was like, well, I would like to click around in that too.
Absolutely. And we're happy. I mean, I don't want to misspeak, but that would be easy.
Yeah, excellent. You know, and it may be at some point, especially under that education and outreach goal, there is like a public facing dashboard that can stem from that work so that people can, you know, just see what all the jurisdictions are working on and how we're working together. I think that'd be super cool. So that's just an idea there, not a specific assignment or anything. The 5 priorities in those 3 buckets. So those are things that what you're asking of us right now is like, do we want to add those things to our work plan? That's the decision that we have in front of us, right?
I believe so.
Yeah. Okay. And so is that like, you know, time frame, like, is that our work plan for this coming year? Or some of these things may be multiple year things, and then we'll, as we work through those 5 things, we'll add other things from the housing action plans. What does that look like?
I'll jump in and help answer that for Jennifer.
Thanks,
So
Tom.
you may recall when we did our work plan a couple months ago, we kind of identified this action plan as a key first step this year, and really kind of the results of that driving a lot of what we wanted to do in 24. So we really see these work plan, these actions kind of populating the 24 action, the 24 work plan. Certainly some of these are going to go on forever, right? Some of those funding things, you know, because all the jurisdictions said we want to fund affordable housing, and that's what the RHC does. So it was a natural fit that these are things that the RHC is already doing, but we wanted to kind of be intentional and say, yes, you know, these are things the RHC is doing, we're doing on a regional basis. So even though individual jurisdictions highlighted those for their jurisdiction work plan, those are going to be ongoing as just core elements of what the RHC does. But then we can add to those over time. I think some of the things that Jennifer talked about as we talked about, some of them around, you know, tenant protections or other things of, okay, how do we do that on a regional level when each jurisdiction may be at a different place along that time frame, or those things that we can really do. So those are those types of kind of policies or actions we recognize were important as regionally, but then how do we work together on them regionally, you know, as a single entity? So that was some of the struggle that as we figure that out moving forward, we can add those items in future years. So I don't know if that fully answers your
No,
question, but
oh, totally does. It totally does. And maybe I didn't answer my question or ask my question very clearly, but it's essentially like, you know, so these are 5 things that are going on our 2024 work plan. Some of them will be ongoing, but then when we go to make the 2025 work plan, we're going to be looking at this dashboard saying, all right, what's next?
Yep.
Excellent. All right. Well, good work, everybody. This is awesome.
Do I see any other hands? Was that Michael?
Yeah,
Okay.
I just kind of want to echo Danny's comments. Since sort of really the inception of this group, even before it was the RHC, one of our sort of purposes was so that we could act in a more coordinated fashion, right? And, that has taken a lot of forms over the years that have sort of grown organically through independent prerogatives of our various jurisdictions, whether that was like Olympia working on some tenant protection stuff that then we borrowed and put into our ordinance. But this is really, I think, the first step in having kind of the pretty cohesive policies crossing jurisdictions for how we approach this issue. And we all know that, the lines between our cities are blurry sometimes, and where the cities stop and the county starts. So, if tenants or people living don't really know what those lines are, it's often the case that landlords don't either, and that housing is a fluid thing that crosses those jurisdictional lines. So this makes all the sense in the world to me, that we're able to sort of measure and compare and contrast and borrow from each other's best ideas so that we can have a more cohesive set of how to approach this issue. So this is really exciting. I think this is great.
Thank you, Michael. Not seeing any other hands raised, or are we ready to?
Talana's got her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Talana?
That's okay. I just want to say I love this, and I got really excited about the education piece. I mean, well, I know we were talking about the information between the different jurisdictions, educating folks about that, but just paralleling that, putting that side by side with basic tenant education and educating tenants, landlords, and housing providers is really, really super. It's a really powerful tool in keeping people housed and reducing homelessness. So I'm excited about this. I really am.
Great.
Good job.
Awesome. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Anybody want to make a motion?
Have I got to make all the motions around here? Come on, y'all. I move that we approve this approach that staff has developed for us and the priorities that they have found for us for 2024. Does that work?
Yeah.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Danny, seconded by Michael. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of adopting this document and making it our working document from here on, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. And again, tech team, especially Jennifer, you took on the brave duty of organizing and presenting this. Thank you so much. This is awesome. So.
Thank you, Chair Cox. And again, I just really wanted to thank all of the tech team. It was a very, very collaborative process. So it was good stuff.
Well, that's the point of having a regional approach, isn't it? It's like we all work together. So that's great. All right. Next on the agenda, we have Tom and Jacinda leading us in the funding request for Claudia's Mobile Home Park. Take it away.
Yeah, thank you. I'll start off, and Jacinda, please kind of jump in. And so I'd ask Cody if you can promote the members of the Affordable Housing Board to panelists. That would be great. So just to provide a little bit of context, following up on our meeting last week or 2 weeks ago, when the issue was brought up, we kind of charged the tech team to kind of come back and think about this. And we talked about this at our executive team. And one of the things that we really wanted to honor was the importance of getting recommendations from the Affordable Housing Advisory Board on funding, and we didn't have an opportunity. The board wasn't meeting between the last RHC meeting and this meeting. So really wanted to honor the contribution and the input of the Affordable Housing Advisory Board members. And so therefore, we wanted to invite them to the RHC tonight to join this conversation so they have an opportunity to weigh in, even if there won't be necessarily a formal recommendation coming from the advisory board. At least advisory board members have a chance to kind of participate in the conversation. So it was really important for us to honor the role that the RHC has allocated to the advisory board of providing recommendations of this nature around funding. So that was the first kind of as we set this up. And so there is a staff report in your packet that we put together to provide a little bit more context that Victoria provided to us around the potential acquisition of this Claudia's Mobile Park Estates. That's an unincorporated county in the Nisqually area. And so we do not come to you with a recommendation of what to do next, but really kind of talking about options. And so the one real option that is available is if the RHC wanted to would be to kind of commit future funding, next year's funding for this. All the funding from 2023 has been allocated, but if you wanted to look at allocating or committing some of 2024 resources, that is on the table. So with that, let me turn it over to also Jacinda to maybe provide a little bit more context or any other insights in terms of as we look at what this would mean around acquisition of a mobile home park.
Thanks, Tom. Just wanted to add, as we talk about options for potentially funding or partially funding this purchase, that the board chose to do that earlier this year, a forward commitment with Southport to meet another affordable housing project. And at that time, you all had kind of directed us to come back with an out of cycle process, I guess. So wanted to let you all know that the timing of this particular conversation is kind of overlapping with that conversation that the Affordable Housing Board is also having about that out of cycle process. So that out of cycle process is being discussed at the board. It's on our radar, but the timing of this, unfortunately, like we hadn't quite gotten all the way there. But did want to remind you all that we have, or this board has in the past, kind of done a forward commitment. And again, Victoria is in attendance. Thank you, Victoria, for kind of further in-depth questions. And just also wanted to acknowledge that, as I think Victoria shared with us last time, this is an issue that, we are already seeing more of in our community in Thurston County, and kind of building on Jennifer's presentation with the crosswalk. It was something that tech team had also acknowledged during our work, and had identified, wanting to work on a policy or a program or standard for working toward preservation of manufactured and mobile home parks. So other than that, I don't have a whole lot to add that wasn't said last meeting, but do have Victoria here as well if there's any specific questions.
Ready? Carolina? Is that a raised hand? No, straight gesture. All right. Deborah Larson, and Deborah, why don't you go ahead and ask your question, and then let's make sure we welcome all the team members who are here with you.
I was going to ask, how do we know the age and condition of the mobile homes that are in the park now? I'm just wondering if they're in good order.
Does anybody from staff know this, or is Victoria on the line where she could answer it?
This is Victoria. I believe that there is actually roughly, there's a large percentage of RVs. And then there's another percentage of manufactured housing homes. But the purchase would, just to clarify, the purchase would be for the parcel of land itself, not the manufactured homes.
Would the intent be to keep the people on that land though? Or replace those items?
So the intent is to keep the community operating as a manufactured housing community and keeping those residents in their owned homes.
Did that answer your question, Deb?
Well, yeah, I think that I may even have driven by this park when I was coming home today. Is it in Nisqually?
Yes, it is.
Okay. I saw something there. Okay, thank you.
All right. Craig has a hand raised, but before we go to Craig, Talana, could you introduce the rest of your committee here? Advisory committee?
Sorry, I was on another screen. So we have Deb Larson with us. I think Deb is from Yelm. We have Craig, who's also part of the committee. It looks like we have, I saw Donna on the call. And who else did we have on the call? Am I missing somebody else? I think that is it on the call with us from the team. From the board.
Okay. Thank you, and welcome advisory committee members. We appreciate you taking the time to be here today and help us think this through. So Craig Chance.
Well, thank you. And I live in the urban growth area of Olympia. My day job is with the Housing Authority, and really appreciate that in general in the plans here and the action plans looking at manufactured home neighborhoods, communities, and long-term, there's a clear need for some legislative help here. These are developments, it sounds like this one might have started out that way, that truly were mobile. They were RV parks. Now they're communities and neighborhoods, and the people who live in them often have substantial economic equity in the homes, and they often have substantial debt. They're secured by the structures, and the structures aren't all that mobile. They're often not mobile at all. So they are truly trapped in these situations. My first engagement, something like this, and it was light, but it was, oh goodness, 3 decades plus ago, and it was a manufactured home community that a big box store had their eyeballs on, and they would have scraped, as they like to call it, the homes off the land and turned it into a big retail store. Unfortunately, as I say, my light engagement was suggesting Washington Community Reinvestment Association might be able to help. So please see they're taking a look at this project. This project, you're all in a tough situation because these are going to be, I think, pretty common type requests, particularly if we can't figure out some legislative requests. I think several of us probably received from Commerce today a opportunity for another park to be purchased, or community. I try to avoid that word park. They're really communities or neighborhoods, but there's a second one on the table, so to speak, this afternoon. To Deb's question, sometimes a concern can be what the quality of the infrastructure is, because often the sewer, the water system, the streets are owned by the owner of the community, and they often were built a long time ago, and they're often in, at least sometimes can be in pretty decrepit condition. And so it can, concern or any kind of a letter of interest or conditional commitment is verifying those are in decent condition, or substantial repairs are made for potable water or for fire protection. When will that have to be done? How expensive will it be? And how will it be improved? And I think those kinds of questions are kind of at the core of the difficulty of your decision today. This is a request for roughly 40% of available funding, and there's others down the way. This one has some unique features, and I haven't looked at it carefully, but a quick look at the county site, it would appear that a number of these spaces, or excuse me, a number of these structures on the spaces are owned by investors. And so if grant funds go in there, how do we have some assurance as a community that the investors who benefit from the grant are going to not going to raise rents so that they're no longer affordable to the very people that we're trying to protect this afternoon? Thank you.
Interesting. Deb, you have your hand raised again. Was that just left over, or do you have a new question?
It's just left over. I can't figure out how to take my hand off.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
All right, Michael?
Thanks. I guess like my struggle with this, or I guess the piece that I don't quite understand. So what's being asked of us is if there's some type of public low interest loan that we could provide that would then subsequently be paid back. But reading the staff report and hearing the discussion, like I think just the baseline question is like, do we have that tool in our toolbox? And my read of this is it sounds like we don't really have that capacity. If we wanted to do something along those lines, we'd essentially have to create a program and obligate a significant chunk of our funding next year in anticipation of that, which is probably too late for the park anyway, because we don't have the money right now. And what's needed is disbursement on a pretty short timeline. Tom, is that right? Like our tool is future money that would go out in a new way that we haven't ever contemplated doing before.
Yes, in the sense of all our funds have always been grants, so we haven't set up a loan program. You know, we talked about that with Southport. We said, you know, should we do it as a loan or a grant? And we kind of said as a grant, because a loan paid back, you get, you know, $30,000 a year, and you know, is it really worth? I mean, yes, there's value in that, and it's limited. It's not a huge amount of money coming back, you know, every year to reinvest. But it would, I don't know, and we need Victoria to answer in terms of how quickly they would need this money, whether, you know, a commitment now, and we could, you know, or pay down a loan, you know, if we had to wait until 2024, we provide financing, and that they would be able to get, whether it's WSFIC financing or private sector financing, then we can pay down a portion of a mortgage or a loan that they would have to take out, which would then reduce the payment. So, yeah, would have to kind of look through kind of what those options will look like. But ultimately, you know, the way it would be structured is, right, we've provided a contract, provide a loan, we have promissory notes and deeds of trust, and provide that funding like we do for other capital projects.
Thank you.
Lucinda, and then Danny.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of briefly clarify that when Victoria, so this issue kind of came to our attention actually at Housing Washington conference a few months ago. Victoria was there as well as Krista Lenson and myself, and just create an opportunity for her to say, hey, this has come up. So I think this whole conversation around, excuse me, a 2% or low interest loan is something that Victoria and her group has proposed, mostly just because there isn't an expectation on their end that we would necessarily just grant funds. That is kind of how we have typically done it. So there isn't anything saying that we couldn't grant them if that's what, you know, if this body so choose to provide funding, and you know, if you all chose to do a 0% or a grant approach. that interest rate, that 2% interest rate is what came to us from Victoria, because that's the expectation that there wouldn't necessarily be free money, and that that 2% interest rate is what is needed to make it more affordable for the residents. So again, and like blending the funding, because interest rates are so high with other funding programs right now, that's what's making it unaffordable. So getting, you know, a lower interest rate or 0% interest rate would make it affordable for residents. So not to say that, you know, it has to be 2%, I guess, or a new program would have to be set up, but that's where that 2% came from.
Gotcha. All right, Danny.
Yeah, and I see Victoria had was not in the room for a moment, so I was going to bring attention to that, but I see that she's back with us now. I have a question in terms of so when we talked about this last time, my understanding was that if there was a solution to be found in terms of finding the capital funds to do this, that the loan itself would be administered by the Northwest Cooperative Development Center. And so it wouldn't have to be any of us taking on the administration of the loan itself. So I want to clarify that. And I'm also curious around terms for the loan other than the interest rate. Like how long is the lifespan of this loan? What does it look like if we were to make this decision in terms of when we would see the funding returned?
Yes, and sorry, I was in the car and then I got my computer and now I'm in a library because they're public buildings that have a very good purpose. Anyway, so the normal term, and as Jacinda said, I would love free money. Free money is great. Free money comes with a lot of strings. So I think low interest money is probably the best solution and the best option that really meets municipalities and jurisdictions with what they need and gives the residents what they need. So the traditional terms that we typically operate are a 10-year term amortized over 30 years. And that's what I'm currently looking at when I'm looking at the financing structure. That is the term that we get from our other lenders. And it's the term that we also use with WishFit money that is offered at 2% as well. And I think just to contribute to kind of summarize some of the comments, yeah, what we're looking for in what I'm asking municipalities and I'm asking this body to consider is what is there? What is the opportunity, or is there an opportunity for rapid capital at a low interest rate? And I don't think that there's a request that you just give me money whenever I ask. That would be great, but I can't assume that. So I think that there, what is the competitive nature of it? What's the cycle of it? And what is the rapidness that can be delivered for opportunities? And I think that Craig mentioned the one in Tumwater. It's 114 units of 55 plus housing. That's a problem. I mean, all those residents already have reached out. They've already had a meeting and they want to become resident owned. I haven't dug through the financials, but I'm going to assume that they're in a very similar position as the residents at Claudia's.
And can I ask a quick follow-up question? Or I'm just going to lift up a question that I heard in what Michael said. What the community needs before this 70-day period is up is a commitment, right? Not the actual funding itself. Okay, just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, well, and I will also say they don't need it. I could put things under contract and try to figure them out and have them fall out of contract because the financing doesn't come through. That's absolutely possible. That's not best practice though. And I don't think that that's not how we run our program. We like to have a solid commitment from our vendors before we put things under contract, knowing that due diligence plays a factor in the final commitment, the final package, knowing that there's a lot of factors that go into that that period between contracting and closing. And so we're looking for the commitment, not necessarily the cash at hand. Yes.
Okay. Greg, is that a new question? Okay.
Thank you. And this is a suggestion because the amount of money up front is challenging. And so trying to have less money up front, and perhaps Victoria or somebody else can answer it. I haven't seen any, nor have the rest of us seen any numbers here. I don't think anybody else has. But part of the challenge is the rates are so much higher than they would have been 12 months ago. But it is conceivable for less money, an entity like this fund could pay down the interest rate or even have an ongoing annual subsidy to the interest rate until such time. We hope that the interest rates might come down a little bit. It's not such a big hit up front to the fund, and arguably it could be delivered sooner. It's done and under some circumstances. I just have no idea whether it'd work in this situation or not.
Can I clarify, Craig? So you're saying that, like, rather than be the ones to provide the loan itself,
Mhm.
we provide, like, we set aside a contribution each year to cover the excess interest that would have to be
Exactly.
paid. Okay.
Perfect. It'd be one way to do it. Say the rate, just pick a wild number, is 8%. And maybe it works if the rate was 5%. So we'd be buying it down to, or subsidizing it to that 5% level.
That's a really interesting approach. Appreciate you bringing that up.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it is an interesting approach. And one of the things I've been kind of noodling on about this, because Claudia's is not the only mobile home park in Thurston County that's in trouble like this, is the possibility of creating a revolving loan fund, setting aside perhaps part of our home fund money that would do exactly what Craig is describing here, would allow mobile home park communities that want to purchase their park to come to us for very low cost small loans or grants to do that. And I just wonder if there's any appetite for exploring that as well.
Can I ask a clarifying question about your question, Carolyn? Are you talking about creating a fund that would send out a loan, and then based on the residuals we get back on that to like bond them somehow to get more money to send out more loans? Is that possible? Or that feels kind of like a pyramid-y sort of thing. I don't know. That feels a little weird.
It
but-
does. Yeah, it does feel pyramid-y, but I will also tell you that that's actually what WishFIC does. So we have a dedicated program at WishFIC for the preservation of manufactured housing. That program is funded by servicing fees and some interest from LIHTC funding. So they're recycling it and putting it into a different program rather than, because they can't have excess money, right? So like, while it's not a revolving loan fund, it operates similar. And so, and in full disclosure, this is something that this is not just here, right? We know that this is a statewide issue. There will be 12 communities and 7,000 residents as soon as all the landowners have filed their proper notification. And that's what I know of today. So this is a huge issue, big issue. So I am going to the legislature and asking lawmakers to create a dedicated funding source. If you talk to your colleagues at Gig Harbor, they're in a very similar situation. They're having conversations with their lawmakers about and asking for funding as well. I think that is part of the solution. Like this is, putting a dedicated state funding source of money to help with acquisitions for sure. I don't anticipate it being the full solution. And so that's where I still think that it's a good thing for municipalities and jurisdictions and regional councils to consider what can we do locally. What dedicated funding sources can we have locally? Is there a funding sources? What does rapid capital look like? What would a revolving loan fund look like?
Yeah, it's a lot to consider. Deb, is that a new hand raise?
That's a new one.
Okay.
I'm wondering what kind of numbers we're actually talking about for purchasing this park. Does anybody have the number?
Fair market
And-
value, fair market value for the park is about $10 million.
That's the total. But are you not asking us for $10 million, correct? Good. I can't hear you.
Victoria, so you understand, we have our Affordable Housing Advisory Committee members are with us today, and they didn't have the benefit of hearing this before. So if there's a little bit of a walkthrough that you could help, maybe that would help move things along a little faster.
Yes, sorry, I'm just trying to pull up the document so that I can walk you through some of the numbers and some of that information. Sorry, it's taking me a second to get that information. Okay. Okay. All right. So I mentioned that it's like half RVs, half manufactured homes, but there's, according to the seller, there's 55 RVs and 54 manufactured homes. The fair market value for the property is roughly about $10 million. I do know that the owner has a competitive offer for that price point already, and if they have it in hand, they should send it to me, but I don't think that they have it in hand. I think they've talked with several people. What we would be looking at and what I have pulled together is a funding structure with WCRA coming in with about $5 million. The Wishvic coming in with about $3 million. I'm able to access rapid capital money that is a dedicated funding source, direct appropriation money that is managed by Commerce. I'm able to pull that about $1 million of that in. And then I would be looking at about $2 million or so needed to finance the acquisition from this body here.
Did I hear a comment? Okay, I guess it was just noise. Thank you, Victoria. Does anybody else have a question or comment?
I've got a comment. Just listening to the conversation. I see there's what I've heard is that we've got potentially 3 things that we can consider. One of those is say we can't do anything in this situation, but we need to look towards the future to figure out what we do when these problems arise, and what kind of role the RHC can play. We could also set aside $2 million out of the 2024 funding pot as a low interest loan that would be administered by the Northwest Cooperative Development Center. Or we could opt to set aside, as Craig suggested, that buy down on the interest rate. You know, I don't know what that would look like in terms of, you know, life of the loan until rates go down, until some kind of refinancing can happen. But those are kind of like the 3 options that I see in front of us. If there's anything that I've missed in terms of potential actions we could take, somebody chime in, but I just want to kind of frame it up so we can kind of narrow it in on what direction we'd like to go.
Thank you, Danny. I like your framing. Carolina?
Yes, thank you, Danny, for that framing. I appreciate it. I guess my question would be in regards to that third option of the buy down of interest rates. And I'm not sure if Craig could like help educate us a little bit more on that and like what that entails and like just.
Frank, would you like to speak to that?
Could be a couple ways. One, and it's dependent upon what the lenders engaged are willing to do. It could be an upfront payment. Some of you probably experienced that with basic home mortgages. You have this rate at a 1% fee or this other rate at a 2% fee. So that's the most simple option. And the other is a direct payment where one has to grind the numbers on this, the amounts being borrowed, but a portion of that interest is paid by somebody else. In this case, it'd be the Thurston County Fund, and the borrowing entity is paying principal and their interest rate. So they're paying it, and using my earlier example, as if it was 5%, but the real rate's 8%. So the differential is paid by this fund on a monthly, quarterly, or annual, however the payments are structured. And then it would be, is that going to happen for 5 years? Is that going to happen for 30 years? Those are all decisions that have to be made in that structure. It is arguably more complicated, but it has the attribute of not draining so much money out of the fund in 1 year.
Thank you. Deb, I see a hand raised. Is this a new one or you're having?
This is a new one. This is a
Okay.
new one. I had a suggestion. I just wondered if anybody has spoken with the Nisqually tribe, because this park is in their area, and probably has tribal members that are living there. I wondered if they might be willing to contribute something to this, to solving this problem.
I don't know. Victoria, do you know if there's been any conversation with the tribe about this?
No, and the tribes should also receive the emails that we all do as well. I haven't had any tribe approach me. I think that it to my knowledge, this isn't on tribal land. Is this on tribal land? No, and so I think that their involvement would be very limited. I mean, we have many resident-owned communities that have a huge percentage that are affiliated with tribe or tribal members, and that specific tribe has not been involved financially.
Well, I'm just wondering, because they give out grants to a lot of different charities here in the local area, but I mean, they're smaller grants, so I'm not aware of how much they might have to donate or put forward, but I think it's worth asking them, because they have built just recently, I think, housing for their elders, and a lot of this is elder housing.
Thank you, Deb. Michael?
Thanks, Victoria. Is there any way to know, or do you have a read on whether a prospective third-party buyer would be purchasing the land for the purpose of redevelopment, or to own the park and then potentially, if they want to raise, the lot rent, then they raise lot rents to try to make more money off it? Like, is this one that's ripe for redevelopment, or is it more of like an economic investment by a third party?
I can't make any educated guesses. This is an educated guess without data to back me up. But what I would say is that this is not a redevelopment opportunity. Most of the redevelopment happens when it's transit related parcel of land. Like, that's really where most of the redevelopment and the park closures have happened, is transit related or airport related, or apparently in Ellensburg it was related to the rodeo, but that's Ellensburg. So No, I don't think that this is going to be redeveloped. I think that it's an investor owner. It's especially when you have communities that large, investor ownership is really most likely here going to happen.
Okay,
Thank
thanks.
you. Ryan?
Yeah, I was just gonna mention, following up on the future development of the property. The property is zoned rural residential, 1 unit per 5 acres. So any future development of that property is gonna have to conform with those requirements, which is, 1 dwelling unit per 5 acres. So it's likely that the highest and best use of that property is as a manufactured home park, which means it's less likely to convert to something else, because the economic benefit of that being a park is much higher than it would be at 1 unit per 5 acre housing development.
So did the park predate the zoning for that, or how did they?
I'm sure it probably did. It's,
Right.
it's a remnant of older zoning, probably has, an old, maybe a conditional use permit, or, some kind of old land use approval that would have certainly predated the Growth Management Act. I'm not sure the age of the homes on there, but, it's probably 50s or 60s era development, predating current codes for sure.
Okay, thanks, Ryan. Anybody else have a question, comment? Hearing none. Danny, would you walk us through the framing that you did? So
Yeah, I did just see Michael come off mute. So did you have something you want to say, Michael?
No, I guess I don't know when we get to the point where we weigh in on how we feel about these various options, but
I think we're there.
yeah, that's what I was gonna, let's frame them again, and then let's see how we feel about them.
Yeah. So real quick, our options are to do nothing. And we actually, I think we just added it to our work plan for 2024 to start working towards, what is the RHC's role in when these problems come up. And so look towards the future. We could set aside $2 million from or make the recommendation to, if for 2024 to support a low interest loan that would be administered by the Northwest Cooperative Development Center, or we could set aside a buy down on the interest rate. And Craig talked about 2 different ways that could go forward. One kind of like buying points on a mortgage kind of a thing, I think is what I heard. And then, or making annual or regular payments to just have a contribution towards that interest rate, towards that, the payments. So those are kind of like the three different approaches we could take. One of them split into 2.
Thank you, Danny. Carolina?
Okay, I was just raising my hand for whenever we're gonna talk about, I guess, the meat and potatoes of everything. But I know Michael had stuff to say first, so I'll let him go and then I can go.
All right, Michael?
Sure, I guess I'll jump in the deep end first, which is a funny turn of phrase considering I don't actually know how to swim. So I mean, I'm definitely not comfortable with the phrase doing nothing. We have to do something. We have to respond in some fashion, whether that means looking at a plan for next year, developing a more comprehensive system for how to approach this, because we know it's not going to be the last time. Like, we need to have some sort of response in some fashion. I think what gives me pause about, I'm going to call it option 2, which is setting aside a future portion of money, is that if that is a significant chunk of our budget next year in doing that, and if we do that, there's going to be at least 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 more parks that will probably have a similar request at some point in time pretty soon. And it sort of feels a little strange to me that we would be able to make this accommodation, but probably only for 1 entity. So if there's another entity that comes 6 months from now, are we going to have to dedicate like 100% of the pot of funds, even though that will be paid back eventually? But I don't know if we can bond on it, and that sort of goes down a road that I'm not really sure where it ends. But the timeline, knowing that we're going to have a bunch more of these, makes me nervous to provide this for one entity when we're going to have more entities. And the answer at that point in time will have to be a different solution. The interest rate thing seems more appealing to me, but it also, I get nervous about that too, because we're essentially committing to provide a subsidy for 30 years or however long. And that's, funding that we're not going to get back, because that's the advantage you get, is it's less of a hit now, but you don't actually get any of it in return in the future. And that scheme sort of seems a little bit nebulous to me in terms of how it would actually work operationally. And I would also worry about when funds do become really tight, if there's a situation where a future RHC says, well, we really can't do this interest thing anymore because we have this other crisis. And then the folks at the park are put in a really rough position. Like, the future aspect of that also makes me nervous. So I am also incredibly, I should also just take a moment to express my heartfelt sympathy to the folks in this park. There's a huge park, as you mentioned, Victoria, huge park in Tumwater that's going to be in the exact same situation in a few months. And we have to have a comprehensive way to do this. And the options on the table seem really challenging to me to support. We need like a plan. We probably need a state entity, like you've stated, that has a revolving fund, or maybe we can establish a revolving fund. But kind of making that promise in the hopes that we can actually do that sort of makes me nervous as a fiscal steward, because there's so many unknowns that I just get really nervous about that. So that's sort of where I'm at, but I'm also really interested to hear where other people are, including not just the voting members here, but also folks who are on the Affordable Housing Advisory Board, because I want to make sure that we honor, the fact that you all came here to speak with us and sit on this council and provide advice, so that we can lead with your lived experience and lead with your subject matter expertise as well.
And we can scratch the do nothing part of what I said. I had an EIS on the brain, and I was like, well, do nothing is always an option, right?
Okay. I don't see any hands raised. Everybody just thinking about this for a minute.
Talana has her hand up.
Hers just went up. Okay.
And so I'll probably be restating what some others have said. I think from as far as the board has taken as priorities is keeping seniors housed and making sure that folks, stay in affordable housing. And of course, if this doesn't happen, and it gets purchased by somebody who decides to arbitrarily raise the rents, that's lots of seniors that will be displaced. And it's important that, we just do whatever it is we can. And I think that Deb is our pipeline, advocate on the board. I think that, that is something that we are, we want to prioritize is, making sure that our seniors stay housed. And, I think that as a board, we'll agree to do whatever we, make whatever commitments we need to do this, to remedy this. But it is a situation where this isn't the only mobile park. So, what can we do long term? Are there any further protections that can be put in place by jurisdictions to protect, the tenants of the owners in mobile home parks? I don't know the answer to that question, but we've got to come up with some other solutions too, aside from funding.
Thank you. Donna?
I'm also, at first when I heard about this, I thought of the seniors and how this would be important. And I also agree with all of you protecting our mobile home communities. Some of Craig's questions, I had two just kind of long-term sustainability of the park. If this is still raising their monthly costs. What does happen if they have some community-wide need for repairs? Are they going to be able to do that? Are they going to be able to get some other loan? What is that going to add? So I'm concerned about that and concerned about the number of investors who own some of those. Craig, did you have a number there of how many are rented and not?
It's just, I scanned the tax assessment records and it appears there are several, but I don't have a number for you. But
Okay.
it was substantial.
So, and I think the other thing is just having it be $2 million of what is what, 5? And the other parks coming up and their needs. So it's a lot of this is making me hesitate, even though it seems like one of the projects that we would usually support. So yeah, that's where I am right now.
Thank you, Donna. Tom?
Yeah, I just had a question. I don't know if Victoria knows or any other math whizzes out there, but just because I think the interest buy down option is intriguing. Do we have a ballpark, 2 million? We have a ballpark of what that would be. Would that be 50,000 a year? Is that 100,000 a year? Just try to kind of inform the discussion. Do we have any kind of ballpark estimate of what that might be to kind of buy down an interest rate or to subsidize an interest rate?
I think that's a fascinating question, and it's a question that in a financing strategy that I haven't thought of. So I have not played with the numbers. I was trying to as you guys were talking. I have not played with them enough to be able to make any educated guess, really, to be honest. And can I flip in and add to the concern about like what do we do about the future of infrastructure issues within the community and that kind of stuff? That's all part of the financing package. So what we do, and when we look at the acquisition, the residents, we funded over 100% of the purchase price, and we funded over 100% of the purchase price for the primary reason is that we're funding reserve accounts at closing. And we're also funding a capital improvement budget. So during the acquisition process, we're looking at what are going to be those capital improvement needs over the next 10 years and creating capital improvement dollars for those infrastructure needs. So part of the cooperative's monthly operating expenses is actually contributing to that account to ensure that the funding is there when the infrastructure need is presented.
Okay, thank you. Carolina?
Jennifer, did you not have your hand up?
She did, and then it was down. I'm sorry, Jennifer, go ahead.
You're on mute, Jennifer.
Sorry, I think Victoria just answered my question. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. So my concerns, I think, have been kind of stated by Michael and Donna. Not concerns, hesitation. I like that. My hesitation. In terms of, I know that there were several projects that couldn't get funded this year just because there wasn't enough funding, right? And I guess just making that commitment now, then we're kind of cutting those future projects short again, who went through the process that puts us in a tighter situation next year if we make that option 2 commitment, right? It's just, we're putting ourselves and other future projects that I just feel like in a very tight situation. So I just have a lot of hesitation on it. I'm not sure how many projects this year we couldn't fund. Do we know that or fully?
Just to jump in, I don't know. We received about, for our summer RFP, we had about 15 projects asking for about $14 million. And I can't remember exactly how many we funded, maybe 5 projects at around $5 million. I don't know, Jason, did you remember the exact number of projects?
Yeah, I was gonna say around 6, but right there.
And Michael also mentioned the Tumwater Parks. Do we know how many other parks around Thurston County are going to be kind of like in this situation? I think we need to do option 1 regardless. I think we need to come up with a long-term strategy on this. Like, regardless of which direction we decide to go, we just need to come up with that. I don't think option 1 is really debatable. Does anyone know if
I don't know off the top of my head, but I was like, oh yes. So you can Pierce County, Thurston County, and Mason County, you all have a plethora of older, large manufactured housing communities. And you all are like hitting my list multiple times. I have 2 in Mason County right now and 2 in Thurston, and I have 1 in Pierce. You guys are dominating the list. Pierce County has taken it upon themselves. They are going to do an assessment. I can connect you with them, with the staffer at Pierce County who is doing that, but they're going to do a full comprehensive. These are the number of parks that we have. These are the parks that are of highest risk for displacement, from like economic eviction displacement because of development. And they're basing their analysis and their risk assessment on what Bellingham did. The city of Bellingham did this when they considered their opportunity to purchase Bill. They did a full risk assessment. Now, Bellingham only had 10 communities, so that was pretty easy. You have much more than 10. I know that. So I can connect you with Jared at Pierce County, who has taken that on. I strongly suggest that as something, if that's, if you're wanting to look at like what's the breadth of the potential need, I think that's a fantastic place to start.
Thank you.
And
Gary Cooper,
Oh, thank you. So I just have a clarifying question as well. So option 2, it sounded like there was a 2A and a 2B. And the 2A I'm referring to is the points buy down, like you would do in a normal mortgage. Would that just be a one-time payment? It wouldn't be a 30-year obligation. It would just be buying points down at the beginning of the, I guess, down payment portion of the transaction. Is that correct?
I would perceive it that way, yes.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know. So, I mean, that would be an option where we wouldn't be committing ourselves to a 30-year obligation, or not we, but you guys. It's your decision, not mine.
And in any event, you would secure that, whatever that funding was, you'd still have a deed of trust. It'd be subordinate to these other lenders. So how valuable that would be, time would tell, but it would be a secured advance, most likely.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Danny?
So one thing that I've heard is that was actually option 3, Gary, the buy down on the interest, but and option 2 being the 2 million upfront. And what I'm hearing from folks here is that feels uncomfortable, largely because we don't know what's going to get pitched to us next year in terms of just housing projects through the regular process that we have, and also just not knowing who's the next mobile home community to come forward and also need some support. But I did hear some interest in exploring the potential to buy down in one way or another to get a lower interest rate. And so Victoria, first of all, thank you so much for hanging on with us. I can see you're doing multiple things there. Thank your kiddo for their patience. Can you remind us again of the time frame that we're working with? I feel like it was like next week or something that, like, that something needs to happen, which isn't enough time for us to explore this other option. But I also hear hesitancy from folks of just not knowing what it is we'd be committed to, or if the whole, you know, buying points option is even something that would actually be on the table, because it depends on the funder, whoever's doing the financing. So can you remind us of the timeline?
Yeah, you're looking at like November 21st. The funder is WCRA, so I feel like they would be on the table and they'd have that conversation of all the lenders. So I think WCRA would probably have a conversation about that. But yeah, you're looking at November 21st. And so I think that this community and probably every other community until the state can right size an account, municipalities have time to figure out what are they going to do. They're probably not going to be able to be acquired as resident owned communities. And I think that's just kind of a hard reality that that's the timeline. If there wasn't a competitive offer, then we have plenty of time. But I think because this park specifically has a competitive offer, this park is in a competitive market area, I don't see a seller being sympathetic and waiting around. It'll be part of my conversations, obviously, but I don't think that. I think the future for Claudia's and the residents at Claudia's is that it'll become investor owned and it'll just trade to another investor. And I think that's a really hard reality for a lot of the residents that are on my list.
Thank you. Yeah, and you know, I'm trying to see if there's something here for us to do. Just because sympathy for this community in crisis. And so just to feel things out with folks, like, you know, if we're looking at that option 3, you know, either the buying points component or a commitment for however long, you know, are we in a place where we might want to make some kind of preliminary, like, you know, yes, there's something we want to do here, contingent on more information and being able to flesh that out and make a decision. I heard from Victoria that like she can start her processes and, you know, sometimes things fall through. But is that something that we want to commit to exploring further? Great, knowing that it also might not work out.
Who would like to Danny, are you looking for an answer there?
I'm posing a question to the group. So yeah, like, you know, we know we have work to do moving into the future to address this issue, this, you know, this wave that's coming towards us in terms of manufactured home communities. And do we want to explore option 3 a little bit more and say, if we come to some kind of terms that we find agreeable, then yes, there's something we would like to do there. So, and the question is to everybody that I see on the screen here.
Okay. Does anybody want to address that directly, or should we move on?
It looks like Deb and Keely have their hands up.
Yes, they do. Okay, let's go with Keely and then Deb.
Technically, Deb was in queue before me.
I know, but she's had 3 turns at the mic.
It's true. One thing that I'm not hearing that I know came up in retrospect, accepting right-of-way dollars, is that there wasn't an analysis of equity. So are all parks created equal? Do we have parks that have residents that are more vulnerable? I know it's a manufactured home park. I'm sure many residents would meet the definition of vulnerable resident. However, you know, if we have, I'd hate to just do first come, first serve without understanding what is the landscape, what does it look like? I'm not familiar with any of the parks. Are we thinking with an equity lens right now?
Good question. I think from a financial aspect, we definitely are, but there are lots of considerations there. Deb?
I was going to say that even if we paid 10% of $2 million a year, it would only be 200,000 a year. And that's high. I mean, that's a high ball percentage. And I think that if we explored that option, it would be a good idea because it would allow us to potentially make that level of funding available to these other parks and other projects that are in the works.
Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think it's worth exploring further because I think the interest thing, because I think in the least it could be a potential component to include in a long-term strategy. Like it sounds like there's enough interest at the table generally that as we do formulate a long-term strategy, that this would be a component that would be a candidate for analysis to fit into that. So it seems like trying to explore it now seems like we're going to explore it anyway. So we may as well see if there's something that could factor in now just based on the interest and the reception it's had here at this meeting.
Thanks, Michael. Clark?
So this may be just sort of stating the obvious or preaching to the choir, but I just want to express my strong preference for trying to stabilize existing housing, especially existing very affordable housing, as the biggest bang for the buck with our regional resources that we have. So I'm broadly in support, and I'm also really interested in the notion of creating a fund for buying down interest. That's really intriguing to me.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm sorry this timeline is so short for Claudia's, but I think we have to look at the bigger picture because we do have other parks that are in trouble. I think we've got one in Lacey as well that's going to be looking for help, or just right in our UGA area. Jennifer, I know you've done a lot of work on this. Is there anything that you would like to contribute to this conversation?
I'm impressed. I feel like everybody is taking this issue really seriously, and I feel that we all have extreme sympathy for the situation. Um, I think that infrastructure there again, I don't I don't want to take up too much time, but there's so many layers that need to be considered, and I think we're all on the same page about that as well. But Victoria, I don't know if there's anything further that you can speak to, but one of the concerns, I guess, in my mind is whatever route we take, towards help now or in the future, we do know that it's probably inevitable and is already happening that infrastructure is failing, and it's not just like the kitchen sink, right? Like it's large, significant infrastructure that comes at a very, very high cost. And so I guess I think we're all just wise to do what we're doing here, continue these conversations, but really having to flesh out what those potential, long-term risks are as you know, parks, new ownership comes in because this may not be the last owner, right? So this seems to be kind of a flipping situation, for lack of better words, that's occurring.
Yeah, flipping is probably the nicest way to put what's happening.
You're
So,
right. Maybe
but
exploitation, but yeah.
So I think to your point, so Pierce County, just again, Pierce County, they are currently advocating, and they have on their legislative agenda to advocate for CHIP funding to be able to be used for existing affordable housing units, not just new. So with that change, groundbreaker, right? Now I can connect everything to municipal systems that I want it. I don't care. I'm sure that some residents would prefer not to be on municipal systems, but that's not the best thing for the park. So yeah, to your point, yeah, if infrastructure are failing, the edit to the CHIP program would be great. The other edit that has been made and is continuing to evolve is the use of CBDG funding. So we have a community in Mason County that needs connected to municipal sewer and water. The Mason County applied for state CBDG funds, was awarded it, and we're connecting them to drinking water right now. So we use CBDG for that, then we're going to leverage and use CBDG for sewer in the next round of funding. CBDG from the federal level, I don't know if you guys were on that webinar that was earlier today, but CBDG is now opening up to manufactured housing in a lot of different ways, and there is federal funding being dedicated to infrastructure support in communities and existing communities from the federal level. So Jennifer, you're absolutely right. These are aging communities. They were not built to last. They were not built to be permanent dwelling. Like they were literally built to be mobile, right? They were to move where industry was needed. So
Well,
yeah.
and Victoria, thank you so much for speaking to that. And I think you've answered a lot of questions. And that's all really good news. And I'm excited. I think we're all probably excited to hear more about that. Maybe get some resources that we can look at. But just really quickly, Victoria, and I'm sorry, but can you give us an indication of when I know you typically utilize different funding sources or lenders? Can you speak at all to like the level of detail that is required as they are inspecting and looking at park infrastructure to package up those loans?
Yeah, so we do a thorough property conditions evaluation. So we do a standard phase one. We're going to do a title, obviously we're going to pull a title report. We're going to do an ALTA survey to do a boundary line adjustment and all that, right? But then we do a property conditions report. So we bring out an engineer that looks at the entire park from the top to underground, and we scope lines, we look at lines, we look at that. We do that engineer that has conversations with municipalities to determine maybe when things were installed, maybe when they like what information do we have to gather what the pipes are, what the remaining useful life is. We take surveys of residents to say like, oh, you smell sewer every day at 4 o'clock. Okay, where? Why? Let's talk about that some more. So we do a pretty in-depth analysis of the systems within the community.
Thank you, Victoria.
Okay. Brad?
So it takes me 20 minutes to turn on my offline mute. Very quickly, I agree totally with Councilmember Gilman's opinion about this is existing housing, and it makes more sense to try to preserve what we have than build brand new. So I just throw that out as an important point, just as part of this discussion, that a decision today or in the near future, and then also the long-term considerations. I do want to point out that I do agree completely with Keely and the need for an equity analysis, maybe not as part of this initial discussion kind of thing, but as sort of a long-term strategy for the RHC dealing with mobile home parks. The issues with infrastructure are real. We've committed as a city to water and sewer improvements for some of our parks, and it is a very expensive process. But so I think that needs to be considered as well. I just think that there's two parts to this. Number one, an immediate action, how to deal with this particular issue, and then a long-term strategy.
Thank you, Brad. Craig?
My sense is that those of you who are the decision makers are not comfortable tonight making a formal commitment. You've outlined some choices, but part of it is it's a big decision in terms of the dollar commitment. It's an important decision because of the effect on a number of vulnerable households. Is it, and Victoria maybe can answer this, could some form of a letter of interest, as lender types would call it, buy a little bit of time so that more answers could come forward to these elected individuals to make a better informed decision? Could that buy maybe 30, 60 days?
I go back to like, this is just best practice. I could make an offer for $10 million and, you know, probably get the deal. I don't even, like, we're assuming that the seller is going to elect the residents as the buyer. But I could make an offer and get it under contract. The challenge that I have with that and our organization has with that is that we do not want to get in the practice of putting things under contract and having them fall out of contract because of financing. It doesn't give us the credibility that we already have. We've never done that. So I don't want to do that because I can walk on a track record that says that we have 100% close to, certainty. There's very little risk involved with that. And so it's less about a commitment letter from the funder. That's fantastic. It's more about, do I have the right people in the room that are willing to make it work with the right amount of funding at the right interest rate and the potential capital stack that makes this work. And if I have that, then we're good to go. But without that, it makes us hesitant from Rock Northwest perspective.
And that was what I thought, a letter of interest from this group that, subject to all those good things working, they're interested in finding a solution, needs to be worded better than that. But it seems like time is necessary for your organization to help put together that structure, those numbers, so that there's a better possibility of making an informed decision, because it seems impossible to issue anything stronger than that, given the present deadline.
Yes, yeah, and Craig, that makes sense, absolutely.
Okay. Let's see, Brad, I see a raised hand. Do you have a new question or just old hand? Okay. Carolina?
Yes, thank you, Craig, for that question. And Victoria, thank you so much for really being here today, but also for bringing this conversation to light, right? And for really starting this conversation and really having all of us think about the long term, as well as, you're bringing an immediate action because there's an immediate need, but I think it's got all of our wheels turning about what we really need to do in the long term. So if there is another request that comes down the line, that we have a process and a strategy to be able to answer to that. I guess with my points, I agree with Clark and really keeping the housing that we have in our community, but I also really want to highlight a comment made by Keely in terms of equity, and if we really have our equity lens on in this, because I'm thinking about specific communities who don't have the resources to be able to approach the RHC, who might be in a similar condition, right? And then are we just, again, like, I don't know if us having a process first, I just have some hesitation when it comes to that. And I really wanted to highlight again that comment that Keely made, because I really think it's an important one, especially when we're thinking about funding these kind of projects.
Okay, thanks, Carolina. Keely? And then Danny.
Yes, all of the thanks to all of the people. Absolutely. I appreciate so much of your time as a single mom for many, many years. I appreciate wrangling a child through this as well. But I just want to drive it home really quickly that, like, when we think about where we, executive functioning, like when we are thinking about who understands who to talk to, like you just said. I don't want to repeat anything that Commissioner Mejia just said, but I just want to say this is prevalent in all of our funding processes generally, that those that already have capacity, already have access, already are already funded, already know who to talk to, always overshadow the smaller agencies, predominantly by and for and agencies that are led by Black, Indigenous people of color. And in my conversations with Kelly McNelly down in Rochester, you know, it's such a large immigrant family community with 5, 6, 10 people living in black mold infested mobile homes because they don't have infrastructure down in Rochester. They also don't have access to any of these conversations. They may not even know that the Regional Housing Council is happening. In the kindergarten alone, there's 600 children in their school system, one school in Rochester. 300 of them are kindergartners, and they're predominantly English is not their first language. And so when we're having these conversations and we're speaking with such urgency, that we have to remember, like, those that do not know that they can have access to these conversations. And I don't mean to get so passionate, but those who know me, that's what I do.
Thanks, Keely. Let's see, next up is Danny and then Jennifer.
Yeah, I'm really glad that we put this on our agenda for today and that we're having this conversation. I've learned so much, and I think it's really teeing us up for that work into the future. And I appreciate the equity component of this that Keely just so eloquently spoke to. I guess at this point, I think at this point we should have. I'm still, I feel like there's still a little lack of clarity on like the next step with this particular one. There is, of course, we have to do work on this going into the future. So we know that's a step that we actually just put onto our 2024 work plan. Like, we will be working on that. Looking back at what Craig was just speaking to, you know, and acknowledging all of the conversation that we just had, like, Victoria, for one, does it work for you? And then for us, does it work for us to say, okay, can we revisit this in a month with a specific proposal to consider? I think that would give us the opportunity to, for one, know what's in front of us, think a little bit more deeply on this equity question that's been asked. Do we want to do more work on this very specific crisis in front of us, or are we ready to say we can't do anything right now, but we are going to take a forward-looking approach? Yeah, where are we at with that?
Okay. Jennifer, then Gary, and then I think we have to answer Danny's question because we're running out of time here.
Okay. Okay, I'll just be really quick. Keely, really appreciate your comments, and I just really wanted to mirror that again, you know, regardless of the decisions that we make now, there will have to be more decisions made, right? Because the first step is only sort of securing the situation that already exists, right? We're going to secure, say, that existing housing through whatever funding process. But then, as Keely's pointing to, and as I experienced just in the bit of work that I did this summer in the parks, she's unfortunately right on track with, you know, situations of mold and situations of exposed siding or holes in siding, and I mean, you know, really severe conditions. And so we won't be able to stop there, right? At some point, we have to have a path forward that's going to address those issues of equity in, you know, sanitary living and things of that nature. So again, thanks for your comments, Keely.
Right, Gary?
Okay, yeah, quickly here too. I just, you know, from listening to the conversation about what I call the buying down the points option, it seems to me like for the council to be able to even make a decision about that, the council would want to know what is the interest rate at which the project would be feasible versus what is the current interest rate, and how many points would need to be bought down. And once we know that, then you would know basically what the cost is for this particular proposal. And I don't think we have that information. I mean, I'm hearing $2 million, but I don't know if that's what that would actually cost to buy down points to get to whatever the interest rate is that would make this feasible. So.
Fantastic question, Gary. And I wish that I could give you I wish that I was better at Excel and I could in financing structures like this, the creative financing structures, so I could give you the answer. What I can tell you is that $2 million is looking at a pretty hefty chunk of traditional capital with a 7% interest rate, a decent sized chunk of financing at 2%, and some free money, right? Some other sources of money put into there. What really, and somebody had asked, what does this look like for a lot rent increase for these residents? That altogether looks like a $200 lot rent increase for these residents, which is about 30%. What is feasible, what is ideal, what puts that at a more comfortable position is 80% of that purchase price being 2% interest and the remaining balance being at market rate. And so, I mean, I'm happy to talk offline and talk about like the structure and what this looks like in creative financing and essentially playing with numbers in Excel. But what it comes down to is the best opportunity and the best position for residents to be in is having 80% of the financing needed at 2% interest, the remaining at market rate. That's not a request of this committee. So I don't blindly assume that that's something that this committee or this group could be responsible for. But if you're looking for like, what are the numbers? That's my best case scenario.
Okay, Keely, is that a new hand?
It is. Yeah, I'm sorry. Just really briefly, I really thank everyone for being, considering some of the comments that I made, but I just want to shout out again that like I'm not that I'm not the only person saying these things, and also Commissioner Mejia had these things to say, and I find that so very often when I'm that happens a lot where the voices of BIPOC folks aren't heard as loud as, like, I'm a loud mouth, but as white people advocating for equity, and I just really wanted to call that out, and I will stop talking now.
Thank you, Keely. Well, I think it's pretty clear that either we need more time or we have to say we'd love to help, but we don't have a finite way of doing that right now, and that we need to look at the bigger picture. So given the prior framing that Danny brought us, what's the pleasure of the voting members here today?
Well, I think we need to hear from Victoria that if if we were to say, let's see what the buy down option looks like. If we look at that, is it possible to pull together some kind of proposal and by our next meeting in December? And then is that too late for you? Because if the answer is no on that, like that doesn't work, then I think we've hit a dead end here. If that is something that could work, then that's what we have to consider. Do we want to say we for us we've hit a dead end, or no, we would like to take this one step further, give it one more bite at the apple to see if we can make something happen?
Victoria?
I think that works. I think using your language, I think maybe Gary and Craig and other people that want to participate in a conversation where we put the Excel sheet up and we start playing around with numbers and looking at what does this look like. We can bring WCRA and WishFIC into that conversation as well. I think that if you guys wanted to have that conversation to see, does that even work? What does that look like from a numbers perspective? So to answer your question in short, Danny, yes, that's fine. That works. I think that a good next step would be to have a offline conversation about like, what does this really look like when we plug this idea into the pro forma, and how does that play out? I'm happy to have that conversation.
Could you put your contact information in the chat, Victoria? Alrighty,
I can't.
thank you.
No, it doesn't let me. There's not even a chat feature.
I don't think, we don't have chat
Have
for
chat.
public records purposes. I
We
think.
don't. Okay,
Mm.
sorry.
It's okay.
We
It's
have
really-
your, Jacinda and I have her contact information.
Yeah.
Okay, so if they could send it out to the group, we could see who might be wanting to pursue that farther. And then I was just trying to look at the calendar here, Victoria, our December meeting, if we're gonna deal with this again, would be, sorry, I'm trying to get out of it,
The 13th.
the 13th. At 4 o'clock. And that one, for clarifying, it looks like it's gonna be a Zoom meeting again. So everybody prepare for that. So does that work for you to come back, Victoria? If we can get something to actually have a concrete proposal for this board? You're muted.
I know. Well, you know what? I have a full dance card, and I actually have a meeting with Idaho on that day. So on the you're talking about the 13th.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I have a meeting with Kootenai County to do the same conversation again.
Golly. Do you have a backup person who could?
Oh, that would be lovely, but I do not have a backup
Okay.
person. Unfortunately, but I'm happy to have a conversation ahead of time with, a group of people, and then you guys can bring back and, any question or the status of that conversation.
Okay. So does anybody want to have a show of hands about who would like to pursue a conversation with Victoria and perhaps bring back a proposal? Jacinda? Okay. Craig?
We should probably have one voting member. At
We
least
should.
probably. I see Danny raised.
Danny, is that you want to be part of that conversation?
Only because Michael said there should be a voting member there.
Thank you. All right. So if you all can get it together to organize that before our next meeting and come back with something, that would be great. And I see that Tom has his hand up too. Is that as part of that group or something else you want to say?
Nope, as part of that group.
Okay, so Tom.
And I think we as this group should also tackle the question around equity and consider that and think through that pretty thoroughly before we come back around to this group again, so that we're thinking a little bit more holistically as well.
I agree. I think that's great.
And I think we can also add this. We haven't decided our agenda for the next Affordable Housing Advisory Board, but this will definitely be on the agenda for the advisory board to talk about in more detail as well.
Okay, great. All righty. Well, if we have not gotten to the communications update yet on the agenda. Alyssa, is this something that's time sensitive or could it wait for December?
I can do it in 20 seconds.
Okay. So
yeah, so I'm Elisa, the communications specialist to the RHC, and I just want to give everyone a heads up that I will be distributing the legislative priorities document that you all approved today. Tomorrow I'll be starting to send it out, and it's going to be out in the community.
beautiful. Thank you. And is there any burning good of the order? We're already a little bit past our time, and I'm needed in a lot meeting here. If not, I'll adjourn this meeting and thank everybody. This has been a really tough, meaningful conversation, and I think we got to some good thinking here. So thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.